Thanks for joining us today at the Mining News Network podcast. Let's get started.
All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're getting into some seriously cool stuff. Silver and gold exploration with First Majestic Silver Corp.
Yeah.
They just released some pretty awesome details about what they've been up to in 2024 at their San Dimas mine in Mexico. You guys are going to want to hear this.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's not just about, like finding these shiny rocks. It's really about understanding how a company like First Majestic is working to secure the resources that we all need, to power our lives every day. I mean, everything from like smartphones to solar panels.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, maybe we should just kind of set the stage a little bit. So First Majestic, publicly traded company, focus is silver and gold production. They've got operations both in Mexico and the U.S. But today we're really zeroing in on their San Dimas mine in Durango, Mexico. They just came out with this press release about their latest exploration activities there. And the CEO, Keith Neumeyer, he sounds like he's pretty stoked.
Yeah, he's definitely excited. And for good reason. Some of those initial drill results are showing really impressive grades of silver and gold.
Oh, yeah.
For example, in the Sinaloa-Elia Vein system, they hit 23.33 grams per ton of gold.
Wow.
And a massive 1,045 grams per ton of silver.
Whoa.
It's a lot of precious metal packed into a single ton of rock.
Yeah, those are some big numbers. I gotta admit, though, I'm not a geologist, so can you maybe break down what those grams per ton numbers really mean? Like for somebody like me who maybe is thinking about investing in First Majestic, what does that actually mean in the real world?
Yeah, sure. So think about it this way. The higher the grams per ton, the richer the ore. So it's essentially a measure of how much valuable metal is concentrated within the rock.
Okay.
So those high numbers from San Dimas suggest that they've found some seriously rich veins, and that could translate to more profitable mining operations down the road.
Yeah.
And that's obviously good news for investors.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's not just about finding just like a tiny speck of super rich ore, right? I mean, it needs to be kind of a sizable deposit to make it actually worth mining.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And that's where this idea of true width comes into play.
Okay.
It's not enough to just find a thin sliver of high-grade ore. You want a nice, thick, substantial zone of mineralization. And that's exactly what it looks like. First Majestic is finding at San Dimas.
Oh, okay. So they're finding both high grades, A and D, decent width. So that's like a pretty good combo, right?
It definitely is, yeah. And to help kind of visualize how this is all playing out underground, they included some diagrams called long sections in the news release.
Okay.
So imagine taking a giant slice through the earth to get a side view of the ore veins. That's what a long section is showing.
Ah, so it's kind of like cutting into a layer cake to see all the different layers.
Exactly, yeah. And by drilling in different directions, they can start to figure out, how far these veins extend both towards the surface, up dip, and deeper underground, down dip. So they're basically mapping out the size and shape of the potential ore body.
Okay, cool. And speaking of mapping things out, they highlighted 4 key veins in this news release. Perez, Sinaloa-Elia, Santa Teresa, and Jessica East. I'm assuming each of these veins kind of tells a slightly different story, huh?
Absolutely. For example, at the Perez Vein, the drilling results have been so positive that they've been able to upgrade some of their resource estimates. They've moved from what's called inferred resources to indicated resources.
Okay, can you translate that for me? What's the difference? And why should I care as a potential investor?
Sure. Think of it like this. Inferred resources are based on kind of limited data and have a much higher degree of uncertainty. It's like a promising hunch, but not much more. Indicated resources, on the other hand, those are based on more extensive drilling and sampling, so it gives them a much more confident estimate. It's kind of like going from a rough sketch to a much more detailed blueprint.
Ah, okay.
So this upgrade at the Perez Vein is a really big deal because it means they're much more certain about how much silver and gold is actually there. And that reduces the risk for investors and makes the project more attractive for future development.
So it's like they're saying, hey, we're not just guessing here. We've got the data to back this up.
Precisely. And what's particularly interesting is that this upgrade is happening as they drill both up dip and down dip. So that suggests that the Perez vein could be even more extensive than they initially thought.
Oh, wow. Okay, so more potential profit for First Majestic and for investors too, right?
Yeah, that's the general idea. But of course, there's a lot more to consider before jumping into any investment decisions.
Right, of course. So we've talked about the Perez vein. What about these other intriguing names? Sinaloa-Elia, Santa Teresa, and Jessica East. What's the story with those?
Well, each of these veins has its own kind of unique potential. For example, the drilling at Sinaloa-Elia is showing that the mineralization is open to the west. So that means it could extend much further than what they've currently explored.
Oh, so there's a chance they've only just scratched the surface of what's there.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're hoping to find out with further exploration. And then you've got the Santa Teresa vein, where they've identified a whole kilometer of unexplored ground to the west.
A kilometer? That's like a lot of potential.
It is indeed. And finally, there's Jessica East, which was a top producer back in the day but was eventually shut down. Now, First Majestic is going back to this area, and their initial drilling results are looking really promising.
Oh, wow. So it's like they're rediscovering this lost silver and gold mine.
In a way, yes. They're tapping into that historical knowledge of this vein while using modern technology to really assess its true potential.
Okay, this is getting exciting. But maybe before we get too carried away, let's dive into some of the specifics from the drill results. Table 1 in the news release is packed with data, but I'm curious, what are some of the standout intercepts that really caught your eye?
Well, one that immediately jumps out is drill hole SIN 24120 in the Sinaloa-Elia system. They hit 23.33 grams per ton of gold and 1,045 grams per ton of silver over a 1.31 meter interval.
Those numbers are huge.
Yeah, and what makes it even more exciting is that within that 1.31 meter section, there's an even smaller portion, about 0.9 meters, that graded an incredible 32.54 grams per ton of gold and 1,455 grams per ton of silver.
Hold on, so within the already really impressive section, there's an even richer zone.
Exactly. They call these included sections, and they add, another layer of excitement to the findings. These pockets of super high-grade material can significantly boost the overall value of the deposit.
So it's like finding a chocolate chip cookie and some bites are extra chocolatey.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And these included sections are definitely something that investors should pay attention to.
Okay, so all this talk of high grades and impressive widths is getting me pretty pumped. But before we start, dreaming of swimming in a vault of silver and gold, I gotta ask, how can we be sure these numbers are accurate? I mean, how do we know First Majestic isn't, exaggerating?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And that's where this concept of quality assurance and quality control, or QAQC for short, comes in.
Okay, QAQC. Those terms sound awfully technical. Can you break that down for us, like, non-scientist types?
Absolutely. So think of it like baking a cake. If you want that cake to turn out perfect, you've got to follow the recipe exactly right. You measure everything carefully and you bake it at the right temperature. Well, QAQC in mining is kind of similar. It's a system of checks and balances to make sure that the data they're collecting is accurate and reliable.
So they're not just kind of eyeballing it and hoping for the best?
Definitely not. First Majestic has a multi-layered approach to QAQC. For example, they regularly insert what are called standard samples with known concentrations of silver and gold into those batches of samples that are going to the lab. And that helps them to verify that the lab equipment and all the procedures are working correctly.
Oh, so it's like a test run for the lab.
Exactly. They also use what are called blank samples. These don't contain any gold or silver, and they use those to check for any contamination that might happen during the sample preparation process. And then, just to be extra cautious, they'll send duplicate samples to a completely independent third-party lab for verification.
Wow, it sounds like they're going above and beyond to make sure that the data is solid.
They are, and that's a really good sign for investors. It shows that First Majestic is committed to transparency and accuracy in their reporting.
Well, this has been an awesome deep dive so far. I feel like we've learned a lot. Really impressive drill results, the whole idea of true width and the potential of these 4 key veins, and of course the importance of their QAQC process. But I'm assuming there's still more to explore, right?
Oh, absolutely. In part 2, we're going to delve even deeper into the geological context of these findings. We'll talk about what these might mean for First Majestic's future operations at the San Dimas mine. So stay tuned.
Sounds good.
Hey there, Mining News Network listeners. We hope you're enjoying the latest updates on breaking news from mining companies across North America. If you love staying informed about the latest developments in the mining world, we've got a quick favor to ask. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying the show. It really helps us out. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. We've got more exciting stories and expert insights coming your way after the break, so stay tuned and thank you for listening.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into First Majestic Silver Corp's exploration program at the San Dimas mine. before we took a little break there, we were talking about those high-grade silver and gold intercepts. They're finding some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, those numbers are really eye-catching. But you know what's even more impressive to me is how strategically First Majestic is approaching this whole exploration thing. It's not just about drilling holes randomly. They're using geological data to really zero in on those areas that look the most promising.
Ah, so it's like a detective, using clues to solve a mystery. Except in this case, the clues are hidden deep underground, and the treasure is all that silver and gold.
Exactly. I love that analogy. And one of the key clues they're using is, the understanding of how these veins actually formed millions of years ago. So by studying the geological structures and the types of rocks they find there, they can start to get a better sense of where the good stuff, the mineralization, is likely to be concentrated.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So they're not just kind of going in blind and hoping for the best. They're using their expertise to really target those specific zones.
Exactly. And that strategic approach is really paying off, especially at the Perez Vein. Remember how we were talking about them upgrading some of those inferred resources to indicated resources? Well, that's a direct result of that targeted drilling program.
Right, so they're gaining more and more confidence in the size and the quality of the deposit with each new drill hole. And for someone like me who, is thinking about maybe investing in First Majestic, that kind of increased confidence, that's got to be a good sign, right?
It definitely is. I mean, when a company can show that their exploration program is based on solid science, good geological principles, and that it's actually yielding these positive results, well, it tends to make investors feel a lot more comfortable. It's a sign that they know what they're doing and that their investment in this exploration is actually paying off.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got a really smart strategic program. It's guided by, all this geological expertise, and we're seeing some great positive results, which is definitely boosting investor confidence. But I'm curious, what happens next? I mean, do they just start digging up all this silver and gold they found?
Well, not quite. Exploration is just the first step in this much longer process. Before they can actually start mining, they need to do a lot more detailed studies. They've got to figure out if it's actually economically viable, if it makes financial sense to mine these deposits.
Oh, so it's more than just finding the shiny rocks. They've got to actually figure out if it's profitable to mine them, right?
Exactly. They've got to consider all sorts of factors.
Yeah.
The cost of digging out that ore, processing it to actually recover the silver and gold, and then, of course, transporting it to the market. And then there's also things like, environmental regulations, permitting requirements, and what it means for the community, community relations. It's a lot.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a whole lot more complex than just finding shiny rocks.
It definitely is. Mining is a complicated business with a lot of moving parts. But I think those positive exploration results at San Dimas, those give First Majestic a really solid foundation to move ahead with these, more detailed assessments.
Okay, so these findings are kind of like a green light to go to the next stage of the project.
Yeah, you could say that. These results give them the justification to invest more, do more in-depth studies. It's a good sign that San Dimas has the potential to be a pretty significant contributor to First Majestic's overall production in the coming years.
That's exciting. And speaking of future production, maybe we could talk a bit more about those other veins we mentioned before, Sinaloa-Elia, Santa Teresa, Jessica East. Those all seem to have their own kind of unique potential, don't they?
Absolutely. Each vein has its own, its own set of geological characteristics and its own exploration challenges. For example, with Sinaloa-Elia, the fact that it's open to the west, that's really exciting.
Oh, right, because that means it could just keep going. The mineralization could extend way beyond what they've explored so far.
Exactly. It's like, imagine having a treasure map where the X marks the spot, but you realize that the treasure chest, well, it might be buried much deeper, or it might stretch out further than you originally thought.
So they might be just at the very tip of the iceberg in terms of what's actually there.
That's certainly a possibility. It's something they'll be investigating further. And then there's Santa Teresa, with that whole kilometer of unexplored ground.
A kilometer. It's like having a whole new frontier to explore.
It really is. And that kind of scale, well, that really gets geologists excited. They love unraveling the mysteries of these underground systems.
Makes sense. And then, of course, there's Jessica East. With all its history as a past producer, it's kind of like they're giving this old mine a second chance, huh?
You could say that, yeah, I think it really speaks to that, the enduring value of these mineral resources. Even mines that were once thought to be depleted, sometimes they can still have this hidden potential that can be unlocked with new technologies and, new exploration techniques.
So just to kind of recap here, we've got this multifaceted exploration program showing some really positive results. We've got growing investor confidence in multiple veins with, significant upside potential. Pretty compelling story, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it really highlights how important exploration is, in securing the resources that we all need for a modern society.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about finding silver and gold. It's about those materials that make up our phones, our computers, the solar panels, all these technologies that we depend on every single day.
Exactly. It's a crucial point. I mean, mining companies like First Majestic, they're playing a vital role in sourcing these essential materials, and their commitment to exploration, that's what helps ensure we'll have a steady supply of these resources going forward into the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. This has been incredibly insightful. We've gone from trying to decipher those initial drill results to understanding what this could all mean for First Majestic, for their whole program. It's amazing.
Yeah, and there's even more to unpack. In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to zoom out even further. We'll look at the global context of silver and gold mining. We'll talk about some of those environmental and social considerations and how companies like First Majestic are trying to, minimize their impact and do things the right way.
Sounds great. We'll be right back after a quick break to wrap things up, so don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back to our final part of this deep dive, looking at First Majestic Silver Corp's exploration program at the San Dimas mine. I feel like we've really gone in depth here. We've been over those drill results and talked about all that geological detective work that goes into actually finding, new silver and gold deposits.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. And as we kind of wrap things up here, I think it's good to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like why does all of this matter? Why should we care about what's happening way down there in a mine in Mexico?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'll be honest, when I first started looking into this whole thing, I thought, well, silver and gold, that's mostly just for jewelry, right? But I quickly learned that there's so much more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, silver and gold are so important for all sorts of industries. They're essential components in everything. I mean, we're talking smartphones, computers, solar panels, even electric vehicles.
So the next time I'm scrolling through my phone or, driving my electric car, I should be thanking a miner somewhere.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
I mean, these metals are literally the building blocks of our modern world. And as we're moving towards, a more sustainable future, the demand for silver and gold, well, that's only going to increase.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, think about all the push for renewable energy, electric cars, all these new technologies that are coming out all the time. It seems like they all rely on these critical minerals.
Exactly. And that brings us to something really important. Mining is essential, for getting the resources that we need, but it's got to be done responsibly. It has to be sustainable. We've got to make sure that mining operations are doing everything they can to minimize their environmental impact and, of course, respect the rights of the communities who live nearby.
Right. It's like this balancing act, meeting the demand for all these resources, but also protecting the planet and the people who live near these mines.
It is a balancing act. And I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of mining companies out there, including First Majestic, they're making some real progress in this area. They're investing in all sorts of technologies and practices that can help reduce their environmental footprint. They're committed to responsible mining.
That's good to hear. So it's not just about digging up those resources. It's about doing it in a way that benefits everybody.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to get these valuable resources, but in a way that, that minimizes harm and maximizes the positive impact for the environment and those local communities.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've learned so much about silver and gold exploration, and how these metals are just so important to our lives, and how crucial it is that mining is done responsibly.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is that even things that seem kind of niche like mining, well, they can actually have a huge impact on our everyday lives and, of course, on the future of our planet. It's all connected,
Absolutely. Well said. And I hope our listeners are leaving today feeling a little more informed about, about what shapes our world, the geological processes that create these valuable deposits, the companies that work so hard to extract them, and those technologies that rely on these resources. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's been great sharing this journey with you and with all of our listeners out there.
Same here. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time as we explore another fascinating topic, another corner of the world. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Mining News Network. If you found this content helpful, please don't forget to drop us a like and subscribe. If there are topics or companies that you would be interested in or like us to cover next, please leave a comment down below.